Hello, my name is Yael Kadoshin. I'm a lead product manager at SailPoint. I'm gonna present Configuration Hub, configuration change delivery expedited. So Configuration Hub really, it's a new product, and we built it for a couple of main purposes. One is to secure the configuration settings of the tenants, and another is to help maintaining configuration settings in multiple environments. As a best practice, most products would have like a production tenant, of course, but also like a non-prod tenants. Either one non-prod tenant, which is most SailPoint customers, the SaaS customers will have a sandbox, but some have more than one, so you're going to have two tenants. And now the challenges here is how do you keep those environments, those tenants, in sync? As a best practice, you want to test changes before you apply them to production. And the way to do it with Configuration Hub is like the core action is creating a backup. These are like the configuration backup. So a backup is per tenant, per environment, and the way to sync the environments is either promoting a backup from a lower environment to a higher environment, or syncing back in case of changes that have been done in production and needs to sync to a lower environment. So again, the basic functionality is creating a backup. A backup is like a snapshot of the environments, which you can later on create a connection to another tenant, and it's either a tenant in a higher environment, let's say from a sandbox to production, and create a draft which compares the backup to the live tenant and show you what the difference is, which you can deploy. That's the use case of the cross-tenant migration between configurations, between tenants. Now, obviously, as much as we want to test and make changes in a lower environment and then promote them, there are cases that manual changes has to be done in production, for example. But now you still want to make sure that your pre-prod is up to date. And the way to do it is create a backup in production, and then go to your pre-prod and sync, access the backup from production and sync these changes to your pre-prod, which I'm going to demo, and we're going to see how it's being done. Another use case is when you don't have access to the tenants. So in case of implementer, a partner, or services teams that have like a pre-created sets of configuration templates kind of, and they want to use it, bring it over to Configuration Hub in order to deploy to customers, for example. So it's not configurations that come from a tenant to tenant, via connection, but it comes from a file. For that, I'm going to demo, that's the first use case of basically uploading a configuration and bringing configuration files into Configuration Hub, which you can then manage these in Configuration Hub, same way as you manage any other backup that was created within Configuration Hub. So again, like Configuration Hub comes to secure configuration between settings as a best practice. We do recommend that before applying changes to production, create a backup. That will also enable you to track changes. So once you create a backup, you have like a better tracking of what was in the tenant before. And when you deploy that using Configuration Hub, you're going to have a visibility of what was deployed. It's kind of like track versioning of configuration changes. The draft is basically comparison between a backup and a live tenant, which actually gives you the increased visibility to the state of your tenant. So you can always go to a historical backup and compare it to the current tenant and see what happens, which changes were applied to, for example, production since a specific point in time which you took a backup. At the last column, you see it's a new functionality that we're working on now. It's actually to have all these artifacts synced into customer cloud location. That's for a better management and retention of the artifacts. Artifacts in Configuration Hub are either backups that were created automatically or manually by you guys, by the customer. Activity logs, which are the logs of the deployments, and deployed draft, which are the configurations with the detail of the changes that were deployed. So the idea is really use that as a best practice and get used to testing in a lower environment and automatically migrate changes into higher environment, which will give you both the versioning and the tracking of who made which changes to the details of the value and attribute, not just with objects, and also like the ability to have a longer retention of these changes and backups. Just a recap of the journey that we've been through. We started Configuration Hub in 2023. First goal was to create a self-service backup and restore to really secure configurations, configuration settings, and provide like an easier way to roll back if needs to. Later on, we delivered this functionality to migrate configurations between tenant, and that's again to for a better change delivery, easier and more user-friendly way of managing configurations. We also built functionality of rules for attribute and value substitutions to have a context-sensitive migrations of configuration. As you know, specific environments have environment-specific values, for example, specific URLs of sources, and you don't want to override those when you're migrating between environments. And we build that functionality to have like a context-sensitive migrations. Coming up in 2024, the granular user levels, this is functionality that actually we rolled out a few weeks ago. It's ability to have a read-only access to Configuration Hub to view the configuration, so you can apply that new user levels to any other user to give them ability to view only configurations using Configuration Hub. In addition, there are a couple of other new user levels, which I'm going to review later on. We delivered an upload functionality, as I mentioned before. We enhanced the activity log to have a longer retention of logs. Previously, it was just like 20 logs. And also now we have visibility to the draft that was deployed with the details of the values of the attributes that were deployed. And we're working on functionality that we're going to deliver later on to continuously transfer the Configuration Hub artifacts to a cloud location that it will be defined in the customer so they can have a longer retention. As the benefits, like the main benefits is safeguarding configurations, really help accelerating configuration change delivery, have that context-sensitive configuration migrations between environments, as I mentioned, to reduce the manual adjustments that are needed, and really better tracking and visibility to the configuration changes. Just quickly talk about what's coming next. We do want to add additional granular access per object type. So really, if Identity Security Cloud admin has access to manage roles, so let him manage roles only via Configuration Hub. So have granular access via object type. We want to build a better approval process. So, for example, a deployment would be done only after a chain of approvals, which most of the customers have some approval process. So we want to build it into the tool and enable automation, scheduling, and availability of APIs for customers' own CI/CD processes. Just briefly talk about the capabilities that we have. So SailPoint's providing a weekly backups for all the production tenants. Oops, it didn't go. Yeah. Okay. For all the production tenants, we provide the weekly backups. Every customer can create its own on-demand tenant, on-demand backups, and access historical backups. Obviously, manage the versioning of the backups. You can delete it. And create also a partial backup. A partial backup is, when you make changes only for specific sources, you can just back up those sources. Creating a draft from a backup, and a draft is kind of like a preparation for deployment, like a configuration changes that you want to deploy. Ability to view, edit the drafts before deployment, and then obviously deploy it, which it's applying the changes to the production. All that with activity logs, which shows you all the steps and really track the changes that were done to the configurations. More capabilities that we introduced later on, mainly for the cross-tenant migration, are system pre-configured substitution rules, and also the object mapping, which is a tenant-specific substitution rules. That's, or we could call it tokenization. That's for the use case of have context-sensitive migrations, like I mentioned. You don't always want to override one environment with values that come from another environment. You want to have a value-sensitive migration. So these are two tools that enables that. To migrate configurations between tenants, we use functionality to authorize access from one tenant to another to access the backups, view the backups of the other environment, see the summary of the content of the backup, and then edit that, like create a draft from like another tenant's backup and edit that with an interactive JSON object editor. And deploy the changes from one environment to another environment. All that with a built-in internal logic that resolve references and dependencies and make it much easier when migrating between environments, because as you know, IDs are different between environments. So a configuration hub knows to resolve those and substitute them. And so when creating the draft is already prepared and using the IDs and referenced objects from the target tenant, target environment. Quickly go through these new features that we just launched in Q1 of this year. An upload, which I'm going to demo. The upload, again, it's a way to bring in configurations to Configuration Hub when you don't have an access to a tenant and you cannot do a tenant-to-tenant migration. Use cases for that is, for example, if you migrate from another like IIQ to you want to migrate configurations to Identity Now, and we have services teams that can generate JSON configurations from IIQ or from another system, and they want to bring it to Configuration Hub to keep maintaining them and use all the great capabilities in Configuration Hub to deploy them and maintain them. Second use case is migrating between different regions and different domains. So currently the tenant-to-tenant connection is limited to the same region for compliance purposes, but the upload lets you basically bring over configurations from another tenant that is not necessarily on the same domain, and you cannot access it or create a direct connection. Or again, like in cases of partners and services teams, if they have historical exports that were done with APIs or SPconfig APIs, and they want to bring them over or import them to customers, they can actually use the upload now and bring them over. Or again, just share configurations, in the community shared configurations. Regarding the granular access, that's the next feature that we introduced, which is available in production. We created 3 new user levels, and we're going to keep creating new ones. The first one is Configuration Hub admin, which has the access to do everything, all the actions in Configuration Hub. We created the Configuration Hub read-only, and the thought was that that could be assigned to auditors or help desk or whomever should be able to see configurations but not update them. So that's a way to have a read-only access to configurations. And we also created a backup admin that's in case there is a kind of like a segregation of duties, and there are admins that can create or change configuration, create configuration, but not deploy them to production. So they will be able to create a backup and manage and edit that, but not deploy. So deploy could be done by a specific designated admin. We enhanced the tracking and access of the deployed drafts. And again, draft is a configuration changes that you want to apply to your environment. And now we're storing a longer history of these drafts that were deployed, and we're going to provide access to the drafts and also tracking of these historical deployed drafts, historical deployed configurations with all the details of all the values and attributes that were deployed. The feature that we're working on now, we're going to deliver later on, hopefully in upcoming quarter, is transferring artifacts to a customer's own cloud location. We're going to start with the AWS S3 location. So a customer can actually provide an S3 bucket, which Configuration Hub will continuously transfer Configuration Hub artifacts to that cloud location. That would include backups, activity logs, and deployed configuration. So then customers can manage their own retention for these artifacts for different purposes. Quickly going through our retention limits. So we do keep 5 weekly backups, and the users can create up to now it's actually 10 manual backups. Draft, we can create up to 5 drafts at a time. The latest draft will be removed when a new draft is created. Tenant connections, create up to 10 tenant connections, and then some limits in the sizing of the drafts and backups that can be used, as you can see here. I'm gonna move now to the demo. So I'll first demo this flow of, I have this tenant, Yael Megapod, which I have a source, Yael test source, and I want to migrate it to another tenant, which is on a different domain. And now, as I mentioned, one way to do that is either use spconfig to export it, or another way is actually here I logged into my configuration hub. And I have a backups that I created. I created a backup here with that source that I want to migrate. As you can see, I can actually see the details. This shows me the summary of the backup. I can see the details of the backup, and I can see the details of the objects. This is the source that I want to migrate. So you see it's a JSON configuration. One way that actually we can migrate is I can just copy and paste it into another file and then upload that file. Or again, like you can use the spconfig API to export that. And assuming I already have that file that I exported, and now I switch to my target tenant. I want to upload it to SP/SAS/Gov. It's another tenant that I have on a different domain, which again, like I cannot create here a connection to my identity soon domain, but I have a way to bring that configuration over using the upload. So. And the upload feature, it's in production, available on all the tenants. I need to provide a name for the upload, for example, Yael upload. And then I can provide a file. I can choose, let's say, this file. I'm going to click submit. And once I click submit, that upload's gonna appear here. I can actually look at that and see the content of the upload. So I uploaded what I did. I actually just copied it and pasted that one source into a JSON file, and you see it's like really quickly I was able to bring it over to my other tenant. I can actually look at it. So I'm gonna prepare a draft, and what the draft does is comparing that one source that I had in my backup to the source that I have in that tenant. So I brought the source from a different tenant, and the draft will actually compare that objects. It's that draft, as you can see, it includes a lot of objects that exist in my production but not in the backup, which we don't care about, so I can just remove them. I can just keep that one source that I want. So I'm going to save that. So this is the source that I want to bring over. As you can see, Configuration Hub already tells you, even before you deploy, which reference object issues you have, which means like here, for example, that source owner is identity name support, and I don't have identity name support in my target tenant in SP/SAS/Gov. So that appears here as a reference issues, which I can resolve even before I kind of like try to deploy it. Substitution rules, these are a way to substitute values for when we are migrating configurations between environments. For here, this is a tenant-specific rule that I created to change the thresholds of the delete from 10 to 12 when I'm migrating configurations between tenants. Now, I want to show you a way to resolve that reference issues. One way is just to go and update the JSON configuration. I can just come here and change the owner from support. I'm going to look for from support to, let's say, Yael Kadoshi, which I know that exists. And now another way to do that is actually use the substitution rules in order to substitute values between tenants that are migrated, between configurations that are migrated from different tenants. So I'm going to go back to the object mapping. It's not this, it's here. I'm going to go back to object mapping. Yeah, and I have here, I have a default object mapping. So these are default substitution rules that are gonna apply when I'm uploading a file, or when there's no tenant-specific substitution rules. So let's say I'm gonna migrate a configuration from CSS 223 to this tenant, so these substitutions rules are gonna apply. If I'm gonna migrate from a tenant that does not have a specific bucket of rules, then the default is gonna be applied. Here I created a substitution rules that gonna basically apply a new value whenever I'm migrating configurations that wherever configurations hub is gonna identify identity named support, is going to substitute it with Yael Kadoshi, which I know exists in this tenant. Support, as we saw before, there was a reference issues. Now, this was disabled when I created the draft, so I'm going to enable it now. And now, when I'm going to enable it, next time I'm going to create a draft again from that upload, you're going to see that I'm going to prepare a draft again. So the new draft supposed to get these substitution rules, and then you're going to see that that reference issue is supposed to be resolved. So like again, I'm going to just delete all the objects that are in my target tenant and not in the backup. I'm going to just keep that source. And you see, as you see, like reference issues were resolved. And if I'm going to go and edit that source, you see that now the identity, the owner, is Yael Kadoshi. So that's a way, again, to use Configuration Hub in order to do bulk substitutions when you're migrating between environments. In addition to that, Configuration Hub has like these global rules which we apply for like a out of the box, and I'm going to show some examples for global rules. For example, this workflow that I migrated between environments, as you can see, there is rule substitution. So this is a built-in rule that we do have some attributes that we know that when you're migrating it between the tenants, for example, like whomever created the workflow or whomever is the owner of the workflow, these should retain and should not be overridden when you're migrating between environments. So you can see here it's basically the value that I had in my draft, and the value that will be retained, which is basically going to take the value from what's in my current tenant. It's not going to be overridden. That's about the rules. I'm going to demo another use case of the upload, which is, again, Configuration Hub was mostly created to be used as a migration tool and not necessarily as a tool to change configuration or replace identity now, but you can use that to actually change configuration. So for example, as I showed before, I do have that, I'm gonna go to my previous backup. So I do have a source, like that source that I backed up before. We're just going to look at it. As you can see, for example, it has like 3 features, right? So let's say I want to change that, right? So if I'm just going to try to create a draft out of that backup, what's going to happen is that it's going to tell me that there's no differences because my tenant haven't changed, right? So I'm going to try to create a draft, prepare a draft from a backup that I just did, and it's going to tell me, hey, I mean, there's no changes, so there's nothing to change. But if I still want to change that that source, I want to change it and remove like one of the features. So one way to do that is like again, go to that source, take that JSON, copy it, put it in a file, and then upload it. And I already did that, so I'm gonna show you the uploaded JSON. So I already uploaded. So I uploaded that JSON after I modified it. And if I'm gonna look at it now, you're gonna see that that specific source have two features. So basically, you know, I wanted to change that source in that specific tenant. In the same tenant, I put it in a file and I uploaded it, and now I can actually create a draft out of it. And since it's the uploaded file is different than what I have in my tenant, then it should create a draft, and it's gonna tell me. So again, let's just ignore all these that don't exist in my backup. I'm gonna look at that specific source. So you can see, as you remember, I removed one of the features, and now in Configuration Hub, I uploaded to Configuration Hub, and I created a draft, and it shows me the differences between what's in my current tenant and what's in the draft. The draft have two features, and in my current tenant, live tenant, I had three, but it shows like the changes. So actually, these changes are gonna apply once I deploy this draft. I also have that change log that shows the differences between what's in my current tenant and what's in the draft. And again, once I'm gonna deploy that, I'll be able to go to the activity log and see all my deployments. So that's basically a log of all the deployments that were done in my current tenant. I see both failed deployments. I can view them. I can view actually, you know, these are the error messages that, like which objects and what's the failures. But in addition, that's a feature that we added a few weeks ago, and it's now in production. You can see the details of the deployed draft. You can see the details of actually all the configuration that was deployed. So it's all the attributes with the values. It's not just like which object have been changed. That's for failed, completed activity logs. These are configurations that were deployed and successfully deployed. So it means all the changes in that draft were applied to the tenant. That's a new, we added, that's something that again, like we added, it's rolled out to production a few weeks ago. It's a partially completed status. So that's when some of the objects in my configuration were deployed successfully and some were failed, as you can see. So you can see which ones were imported and which one were failed, but you can also go to the draft and see actually the details of those objects. And now with the features that are gonna come next, the cloud storage, customer is gonna be able to configure a bucket, a S3 bucket. That's for start. Later on, maybe we're gonna add, you know, some other cloud locations or some other tools to store versioning. And we're gonna, once this is enabled and configured, we're gonna continuously transfer these artifacts whenever a new backup is created, whenever weekly backup is created, whenever an activity log or a draft was deployed, an activity log was created, we're gonna transfer all these to that location so you can have a continuity and retention as long as you want for these artifacts. I'm gonna switch back to the presentation and just quickly talk about the resources. So you can access Configuration Hub documentation in sailpoint.com under the SaaS solution. So you should see there all the new features that are available. We do have now a tag in the developer community, configuration hub tag, so you can follow and look at discussions and also announcements of new features and community discussions there. A demo, we did the demo. As a takeaway, again, like we do want to encourage everybody to use Configuration Hub to secure your configuration settings and really reduce the manual work that you has to do now in order to migrate configurations between environments. Spend more time on your core identity security activities and identify threats and mitigate risk rather than spend time on maintaining configurations and syncing environments. Thank you so much.